The glass shattered before anyone said a word. It hit the polished concrete floor of the Alderton Center's grand atrium and broke clean in half. A champagne flute, tipped from a server's tray by the elbow of a man who did not stop walking, did not look down, did not apologize. The server crouched immediately to collect the pieces. No one else moved. That was how evenings like this worked. The powerful kept moving. Everyone else cleaned up after them. Lyra Osei-Drummond stood near the entrance, alone holding her own invitation. She had printed it herself, actually. The foundation had sent it digitally, and she had printed it on the paper she kept in the third drawer of her desk at home. The good paper. The kind she used for contracts. She had pressed it flat with her palm before sliding it into her clutch. It seemed like the right thing to do. Now, standing at the threshold of the Alderton Center's annual Architecture and Legacy Gala, watching the server sweep up glass with a small dustpan and a careful expression, she thought perhaps she had overthought the paper. She had not overthought the dress. The dress was right. Navy, structured at the shoulder, silk that moved quietly when she walked. She had worn it to exactly 2 other events: the opening of the Meridian Bridge project in Halifax, and the night her first independent commission had been shortlisted for the Governor General's Medal. It was a dress that had been present at moments that mattered. She wore it again tonight for the same reason. Lyra was 31 years old. She had started her firm, Osei-Drummond Architectural, from a sublet desk in a co-working space in East Vancouver 6 years ago. She had not taken a salary for the first 18 months. She had eaten a lot of toast. She had also, in that same period, quietly become the silent design partner behind the 3 most photographed buildings in the Alderton Group's portfolio. The ones that appeared in their brochures, on their website, in the breathless profiles that ran in national magazines every time Harlan Alderton gave an interview about vision and legacy. He always talked about vision and legacy. He never mentioned her name. Tonight was the first time she had been invited into the same room as him. The invitation had come through the foundation, the Alderton Family Foundation, which ran the gala each year to raise money for architecture scholarships and urban renewal grants. The foundation's director, a warm woman named Suzette Park, had called Lyra personally. "We want to honor the designers behind the work," Suzette had said. "Not just the developers." Lyra had said yes before the sentence was finished. She crossed the threshold into the atrium. The space was extraordinary, and she knew it was extraordinary because she had designed it. Not the atrium itself, that predated her, but the renovation. The soaring east wall of glass, the way natural light fell in amber columns across the stone floor. In the late afternoon, the shallow reflecting pool that separated the entrance from the reception area and made the whole room feel like something you had stepped into from a different century. She had spent 4 months on that renovation. She had fought for every element of it in meetings where the Alderton Group's in-house team had pushed back on cost and schedule, and what they called unnecessary complexity. She had won every argument. The wall of glass had stayed. The pool had stayed. The light, which was free, had stayed. Standing in it now, surrounded by people in evening wear who moved between caterers and conversation clusters, with the fluid ease of people who attended events like this every week of their lives, Lyra allowed herself one quiet moment of something that was not quite pride and not quite grief. Both, maybe, folded together. Then a woman in a white blazer appeared in front of her. "Excuse me." The woman's tone was the kind of polite that is not actually polite. "Are you with the catering team? The South Service entrance is around the side." She said it with a small gesture, the kind of gesture that assumed compliance. Lyra looked at her. "I'm a guest." The woman's expression did not change, exactly, but something in it shifted, a recalibration, quiet and not quite successful. "Of course. Do you have your invitation?" Lyra produced the invitation. The woman glanced at it, handed it back, and moved away without another word. No apology, not even the performance of one. That was the first moment. Lyra remembered it, later as the moment the evening began in earnest, though she didn't know that yet. She put the invitation back in her clutch and walked toward the reception area. Stepping over the shallow pool on the glass bridge she had also designed, and helped herself to a glass of sparkling water from a pass tray. The room was full of people she recognized from portfolios and industry publications, and the specific constellation of names that appeared on donor walls. In public buildings across the country, she recognized Harlan Alderton immediately. He was the kind of man who arranged himself in a room rather than simply standing in it. Tall, silver-haired, with the deliberate posture of someone who had decided in his 40s that he was important, and had maintained that decision ever since. He was surrounded by 4 or 5 people who laughed at approximately the right intervals. Beside him stood a woman Lyra did not recognize at first, and then did. Jillian Alderton, his wife. She had seen Jillian in photographs. In photographs, Jillian looked composed and cool. In person, she looked like someone who had arrived at a conclusion about most people before they opened their mouths, and found the conclusion satisfying. Lyra was not looking for a confrontation. She had not come for one. She had come because Suzette Park had said her name deserved to be in the room. And she believed Suzette, and she believed it herself. And that was enough. She found her table set near the reflecting pool, with a clear view of the podium. Good placement, the kind of placement that meant Suzette had arranged it personally. She sat, introduced herself to the 2 people already seated, an older man named Gordon Theus, who ran an urban planning consultancy out of Calgary, and a younger woman, Preethi Narayanan, who worked in heritage preservation in Ottawa, and they talked easily for 20 minutes about transit corridors and adaptive reuse, and a project in Winnipeg that all 3 of them had opinions about. It was a good 20 minutes. Lyra thought briefly that the evening might simply be good. Then the Aldertons arrived at the table. They were not seated there. She understood that immediately. Their table was at the front, near the podium. The table that had a small floral arrangement that was noticeably larger than all the other arrangements. But Harlan Alderton had apparently decided to do a circuit of the room before dinner was served, and the circuit had brought him and Jillian to this table, and someone in their orbit, a younger man, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than Lyra's first month of office rent, had pulled out a chair and sat down in it as if the table were simply available. The younger man's name, she would learn later, was Bryce Alderton, Harlan's son. He worked for the family group in a capacity that was described in press releases as strategic development, and in practice appeared to mean attending events and agreeing with his father. Bryce looked at Lyra the way people sometimes looked at her in rooms like this. Not with hostility, exactly, but with a kind of blank assessment, the way you might glance at a piece of furniture and try to determine whether it belonged in the space. He did not introduce himself. He picked up the menu card from the table in front of him and read it. Harlan was talking to Gordon Theus. They appeared to know each other slightly, the handshake of men who had encountered each other at previous events without becoming friends. Lyra waited. She was good at waiting. She had spent years waiting for rooms to notice her, and she had learned to make the waiting look like stillness rather than patience. Jillian Alderton's gaze landed on her. "I don't think we've met," Jillian said. She said it the way you say something when you're relatively certain you already know the answer, and the answer is no. "Lyra Osei-Drummond," Lyra said.
She did not extend her hand.
She had found over the years that waiting to see if the other person extended theirs first told you something useful. "I'm an architect." "How lovely," Jillian said. She looked at Lyra's dress, then at her water glass, then back at her face, completing a circuit that managed to convey an entire assessment in under 3 seconds. "Are you working on something for the foundation?" "I'm being recognized tonight," Lyra said, "for the East Atrium renovation." There was a pause, not a long one, 2 seconds, maybe 3, but the kind of pause where you could hear the adjustment happening. The recalibration, the same one the woman in the white blazer had made an hour earlier, only less graceful, because Gillian Alderton was not practiced at recalibrating in situations like this. She was practiced at already being right. The atrium, Gillian repeated. The glass wall, Lyra said. The reflecting pool, the light geometry on the east face. She said it quietly, without emphasis, the way you might describe the weather. Gillian looked at the reflecting pool, then back at Lyra. What happened next happened quickly. Bryce Alderton had been half listening. He looked up from the menu card. Something passed across his face. Not recognition, not exactly, but something adjacent to it, and adjacent to irritation. As if the situation had become more complicated than situations at events like this were supposed to be. He said something to his mother in a low voice. Lyra caught two words. Not necessary. Gillian stood up straighter. The foundation, she said, makes its recognition decisions independently. I'm sure whatever contribution you made was. She paused again, looking for a word. Appreciated. The building won a Governor General's Medal, Lyra said. Last spring. The pause this time was longer. Harlan Alderton had turned from his conversation with Gordon Theus. He was looking at Lyra now. Really looking, the way he hadn't before. There was something in his expression that she couldn't read immediately. She would understand it later. At the time it looked displeasure. Later she would recognize it as something closer to recognition, complicated by the fact that he did not want to be recognizing her. The medal was awarded to the project, Bryce said. His voice was smooth, practiced. The Alderton Group project. The medal was awarded to the Designe, Lyra said. My design. Filed under Osei-Drummond Architectural. You can look it up. Bryce stood. He was taller standing, and she thought he probably knew that, and had calculated it. I think, he said, and his voice had changed. The smoothness was still there, but something harder had come into it. There may be some confusion about your role in this project. There isn't, Lyra said. We should let these people enjoy their evening, Gillian said. She was looking at Gordon Theus and Preethi Narayanan, who had both gone very still in the particular way of people who are deciding whether to intervene or to witness. This isn't the place. She was invited, Preethi said. It came out simply, without drama. Gordon Theus nodded once. Bryce's jaw tightened. He looked at his mother. Gillian looked at Harlan. Harlan Alderton had not said anything for 45 seconds. He was a man who understood the weight of silence in a room full of people with good memories and access to press contacts. He was also, underneath whatever careful calculations he was running, cornered, and she could see that he knew it. Lyra, he said. It was the first time he had used her name. He said it the way you say a name when you've known it longer than tonight. Harlan, she said. Something passed between them. The room, which had begun to notice, not loudly, but in the way rooms notice, with small adjustments of posture and attention, went quieter around their table. We've worked with Osei-Drummond on several projects, Harlan said. He was addressing the table, or the air around it, in the voice of a man offering a correction before anyone else could. Excellent work. The atrium renovation is extraordinary. He said this with the tone of a man who had designed the strategy of saying it in approximately the last 30 seconds. She designed it, Preethi said again quietly. Yes, Harlan said. He looked at Lyra. Yes, she did. Gillian's expression had not moved. Bryce had sat back down. The menu card was in his hand again, but he was not reading it. Lyra picked up her water glass. She did not say thank you. She did not say anything. Dinner was served. The gala proceeded. The speeches began. Suzette Park took the podium and spoke about the Foundation's grants and its commitment to the next generation of Canadian designers. She mentioned Lyra's name with warmth and precision, Lyra Osei-Drummond, whose renovation of the Alderton Center atrium had been described by the jury as an act of radical generosity toward the people who used the space. There was applause. Lyra stood. She did not look at the Alderton table, though she was aware of it in the way you are aware of something you have decided not to look at. After dinner, there was a reception. People moved. Conversations reformed. Preethi Narayanan found her near the reflecting pool. You all right? Yes, Lyra said. And then, because it was true. Mostly. "What was that?" Preeti asked, not accusingly. "Just ask." Lyra considered. "Years," she said. "That was years." Preeti nodded, the way people nod when they understand something they didn't need explained. What happened next was not something Lyra had planned. She would say that afterward, clearly, to anyone who asked, and it was the truth. She had not come to the evening with a strategy. She had come with an invitation and address that had been present at moments that mattered. But events have their own logic. Gordon Theus found her before she left. He pressed a business card into her hand and told her that his consultancy was working on a transit-oriented development in Saskatoon. And the design partner had just pulled out of the project. He said her name with the confidence of a man who had just spent an evening recalibrating his understanding of who she was, and found the recalibration worth making. 2 days later, a journalist from a national architecture publication called. Someone at the gala had mentioned her name. The journalist had looked up Osei-Drummond Architectural and found the Governor General's Medal and the portfolio of work credited to Alderton Group projects, and had questions about how that attribution had worked over the years. Lyra answered the questions carefully and honestly. She did not editorialize. The facts, arranged in order, did the work themselves. The article ran 4 weeks later. It was not a short article. The Alderton Group's communications team issued a statement. The statement used phrases like long-standing, collaborative relationship, and proud to have worked with, and we congratulate Lyra Osei-Drummond on her well-deserved recognition. The statement did not address the specific question the journalist had asked, which was why 3 buildings credited to the Alderton Group in national publications had Osei-Drummond Architectural listed as architect of record in the permit applications filed with the relevant municipalities. The journalist noted that the statement did not address this question. She printed both. Harlan Alderton did not appear in public. For 10 days after the article ran, Jillian Alderton's charitable committee work. She sat on 4 boards, became briefly the subject of conversation in those same circles where it had previously been assumed, and therefore invisible. Bryce Alderton gave an interview to a business publication that was intended to manage the story, and instead produced a second wave of coverage. The Alderton Center atrium, meanwhile, continued to receive morning light through the east wall of glass at precisely the angle Lyra had calculated. The reflecting pool did what reflecting pools do. The people who moved through the space, on their way to offices, to events, to meetings, to ordinary mornings, did not know any of this. They walked across the glass bridge and felt, without being able to say why, that the room was on their side. On a Thursday afternoon in early spring, Lyra sat at her desk in the new Osei-Drummond architectural office, a real office now, with 3 staff and a corner that caught the afternoon light, and signed the contract for the Saskatoon project. The contract was 47 pages. Her name was on every one of them. She signed it with the pen she had kept in the 3rd drawer since her co-working desk days, the same drawer where she'd once kept the good paper. She had printed more than a few things on that paper over the years. Contracts, mostly. The ones that said, in the specific language of binding agreements, exactly who had done what, and what it was worth, and who it belonged to. The pen moved across the signature line on page 47. Outside, the city went about its business, the way cities do, and somewhere in the Alderton Center, in the atrium that caught the light at the angle she had spent 4 months fighting for, morning was already beginning to arrive.